Hello, wonderful listeners, and welcome to our cozy corner of storytelling. I'm so thrilled you've decided to join us today for a tale of adventure and discovery. Before we dive in, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and let us know in the comments where in the world you're retuning in from. We love hearing from you. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and prepare to be whisked away by Fur in the Wind, A Cat is Wild Adventure. Whiskers was a cat of discerning tastes and impeccable habits. His days unfolded in a predictable, blissful rhythm within the sun-drenched confines of the miller's charming cottage. Mornings began with a stretch on the warmest patch of carpet, followed by a meticulous grooming session that left his ginger fur gleaming like polished copper. Breakfast was a gourmet affair, a carefully measured portion of salmon pate served in a pristine ceramic bowl. Afternoons were reserved for strategic napping, a sunbeam on the sofa, a cozy nook by the fireplace, or, on particularly warm days, the cool tiles of the kitchen floor. Evenings brought the delightful ritual of chasing a laser pointer dot, a thrilling, if ultimately fruitless, hunt that always ended with a triumphant pounce on his favorite feathered toy. Life, for Whiskers, was a symphony of comfort. He knew the precise angle of sunlight that would perfectly warm his belly, the exact time the miller would return home, and the particular squeak of the pantry door that heralded the arrival of treats. Yet, despite this perfectly curated existence, a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor of restlessness occasionally rippled through his otherwise serene composure. It usually struck when he gazed out the large bay window, past the meticulously manicured garden, and into the dense, whispering woods beyond. The woods were an enigma, a shifting tapestry of greens and browns that hummed with 1,000 unseen lives. Whiskers had only ever experienced them through the pane of glass, a silent, flickering movie of darting squirrels, soaring birds, and the mysterious rustle of leaves. His domestic instincts screamed caution, warning him of the dangers that lurked in that untamed expanse. But something deeper, an ancestral echo, tugged at his whiskers, a faint, wild yearning for the unknown. One blustery autumn afternoon, a particularly strong gust of wind rattled the old cottage. The garden gate, usually secured with a sturdy latch, groaned on its hinges, then slowly, deliberately swung open. Whiskers, who had been dozing on the windowsill, twitched an ear. A scent rich and earthy, carried on the wind, far more complex than the familiar smells of his garden. It was the smell of damp earth, of pine needles, of something wild and untamed. It was the smell of adventure. His green eyes, usually placid and content, sharpened with a sudden, intense focus. He watched a vibrant red leaf, spun by the wind, dance through the open gate and disappear into the shadows of the woods. For a fleeting moment, the comfortable cottage felt small, almost suffocating. The velvet cushion, the salmon pate, the laser pointer, they all seemed to fade into insignificance beside the beckoning mystery of the world beyond the gate. With a surge of adrenaline he hadn't known he possessed, Whiskers jumped down from the sill. His paws, accustomed only to soft carpets and polished floors, felt the rough texture of the patio stones. His tail, usually held high in proud elegance, twitched with a mixture of apprehension and exhilaration. The gate, still ajar, seemed to whisper his name, a silent invitation to a journey he had only ever dreamed of. And with a breath he didn't realize he was holding, Whiskers stepped through the threshold, leaving behind the known and venturing into the vast, exhilarating unknown. The wind, now a playful companion, ruffled his fur, and for the first time, he felt truly alive, a tiny ginger speck against the immense canvas of the wild. The world beyond the garden gate was not just different. It was an explosion of sensory overload. The familiar, comforting sounds of the cottage, the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant murmur of the miller's television, were replaced by a chaotic symphony of nature. Birds chirped in 1,000 different keys, Insects buzzed with an insistent drone, and the rustling of leaves underfoot created a constant whispering chorus. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and an intoxicating mix of wildflowers and unknown creatures, was a far cry from the subtle aroma of lavender and freshly baked bread that usually perfumed his home. Whiskers took a tentative step, his paws sinking slightly into the soft, yielding soil. He flinched as a low-hanging branch, swayed by the breeze, brushed against his head. Every shadow seemed to hold a hidden threat, every rustle a potential predator. His whiskers, usually so adept at navigating the familiar furniture of the cottage, now twitched frantically, trying to make sense of this overwhelming, unpredictable environment. The initial burst of adrenaline that had propelled him through the gate began to wane, replaced by a creeping sense of vulnerability and fear. He remembered the miller's garden, a meticulously curated space where every plant had its place, every path was clear. Here, paths barely existed, swallowed by a riot of tangled undergrowth. Thorny bushes snagged at his fur, and tall, unfamiliar weeds brushed against his belly. He felt small, insignificant, and utterly, hopelessly lost. A squirrel, bold and quick, scampered down a tree trunk, chattering indignantly at his presence before disappearing into the canopy. Whiskers, who usually delighted in tormenting the garden squirrels from the safety of the window, now felt a pang of envy for its effortless mastery of this wild domain. As the afternoon sun began to dip lower, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a chill crept into the air. Whiskers shivered, his thick ginger fur, so effective against the miller's air conditioning, seeming suddenly inadequate against the encroaching cold. He realized, with a jolt of panic, that he had no idea where he was going or how to get back. His stomach rumbled, a hollow ache that reminded him of the salmon bait he had so blithely abandoned. The woods, which had seemed so inviting from a distance, now felt like a vast, unforgiving labyrinth. He huddled beneath a gnarled oak tree, its ancient roots forming a small, protective alcove. The sounds of the forest intensified as dusk deepened, the hoot of an owl, the distant howl of something he couldn't identify, the scuttling of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. Fear, cold and sharp, gripped him. He missed the soft purr of the refrigerator, the gentle weight of the miller's hand stroking his fur, the comforting warmth of his favorite blanket. He had made a terrible mistake. Just as despair began to settle in, a flash of movement caught his eye. A small, sleek creature, barely larger than a rat, but with intelligent, dark eyes, darted out from behind a clump of ferns. It was a weasel, its fur a rich, dark brown, and it moved with an agile grace that spoke of deep familiarity with the forest. It paused, sniffing the air, its gaze briefly meeting Whisker's wide, frightened eyes. Instead of aggression, there was a flicker of something akin to curiosity, perhaps even a hint of amusement. The weasel, noticing Whisker's distress, let out a soft, almost chiding chitter. It then turned, moving with purpose towards a small, almost hidden opening beneath a tangle of roots. It looked back, as if silently urging Whiskers to follow. Hesitantly, Whiskers rose, his muscles stiff from cold and fear. He had no other options. The weasel was wild, yes, but it didn't seem hostile. Perhaps, just perhaps, it knew a way through this green labyrinth. Taking a deep breath, Whiskers followed the small creature, his every step a testament to a burgeoning, desperate courage. The forest was still terrifying, but now, at least, he wasn't entirely alone. The weasel, whose name Whiskers would later learn was Pip, was an unlikely guide, but an invaluable one. Pip moved with an effortless fluidity through the undergrowth, a dark blur against the deepening twilight. Whiskers, still clumsy and uncertain, struggled to keep pace. Pip would occasionally pause, looking back with an impatient flick of his tail, then continue, leading Whiskers deeper into the woods, but also towards a sense of purpose. Pip led him to a small, dry hollow beneath the roots of an ancient beech tree, a perfect, sheltered spot for the night. The weasel, with surprising generosity, shared a portion of a freshly caught field mouse, a sight that initially turned Whisker's pampered stomach. He had never considered eating anything that hadn't come from a can. But the gnawing hunger was a powerful persuader, and after a hesitant sniff, he found himself devouring the offering with a primal urgency he hadn't known he possessed. It tasted wild, raw, and utterly satisfying in a way salmon pate never had. The next morning, Pip began Whisker's education in the harsh realities and subtle beauties of the wild. He taught Whiskers to distinguish the safe berries from the poisonous ones, though Whiskers, a carnivore by nature, was mostly interested in identifying prey. Pip demonstrated how to move silently through the fallen leaves, how to use the shadows for concealment, and how to read the subtle signs of the forest, the faint scent of a deer trail the distant cry of a hawk, the rustle that signaled a hidden mouse. Whiskers, surprisingly, was a quick study. His domestic life had honed his senses for observation, and now, stripped of his comforts, those senses sharpened further. He learned to flatten himself against the earth, his ginger fur blending surprisingly well with the autumn foliage. He discovered the exhilarating thrill of the hunt, stalking a plump beetle with focused intensity, his muscles coiling and releasing with newfound power. He still missed the miller, of course, and the predictable warmth of his home, but a new kind of satisfaction was beginning to bloom within him, the satisfaction of competence, of survival. Their journey continued, a winding path through dense thickets and sun-dappled clearings. They navigated babbling brooks by leaping across moss-covered stones, and scaled gentle slopes that offered breathtaking views of the sprawling forest. Pip, for all his wildness, possessed a quiet wisdom. He spoke little, but his actions conveyed volumes. He showed Whiskers how to find fresh water, how to identify safe sleeping spots, and, most importantly, how to listen, truly listen, to the pulse of the forest. One afternoon, while exploring a rocky outcrop, they stumbled upon a small, secluded cave. Its entrance was almost completely hidden by a curtain of ivy, and inside it was surprisingly dry and warm. Good shelter, Pip chittered, his dark eyes gleaming. Whiskers, exhausted from a long day of travel and learning, curled up on a bed of dry leaves, feeling a sense of security he hadn't experienced since leaving the cottage. He watched Pip meticulously clean his paws, then groom his sleek fur, a mirror of Whisker's own fastidious habits, but with a practical, survivalist edge. As the days turned into a week, Whisker's ginger fur grew a little less glossy, a little more wild. His paws, once soft, were now toughened by the rough terrain. His eyes, once merely curious, now held a keen, observant glint. He was no longer just Whiskers, the pampered house cat. He was Whiskers, the wilderness apprentice, learning to navigate a world far grander and more challenging than he had ever imagined. The fear had not entirely vanished, but it was now tempered by a growing confidence, a belief in his own ability to adapt and survive. The wild was still dangerous, but it was no longer an impenetrable labyrinth. It was a complex living puzzle, and Whiskers, with Pip's help, was slowly but surely learning to solve it. Days bled into weeks, and Whiskers, guided by Pip, ventured further than he ever thought possible. The initial terror of the forest had given way to a profound respect, and even a strange affection for its untamed beauty. He had learned to hunt small game with a precision that would have astonished the miller, his every movement a testament to his sharpened instincts. He could now identify the warning calls of different birds, the scent trails of various creatures, and the best places to find shelter from sudden downpours. One afternoon, they found themselves on the edge of a high ridge, overlooking a vast rolling landscape. Below, the forest stretched for miles, a vibrant mosaic of green and gold under the late autumn sun. In the far distance, barely visible through a haze of distant trees, Whiskers caught a glimpse of something familiar, a cluster of rooftops, a wisp of smoke curling from a chimney. It was the general direction of the miller's cottage, a tiny, almost forgotten beacon of his past life. A wave of longing, sharp and unexpected, washed over him. He remembered the soft warmth of his favorite blanket, the gentle rhythm of the miller's breathing as he slept, the comforting sound of his home. He remembered the ease, the safety, the predictability. A profound sadness settled in his chest, a realization of how far he had come and how much he had left behind. He was no longer the same cat who had stepped through the garden gate. The wild had etched its mark upon him, hardening his paws, sharpening his gaze, and deepening his spirit. Pip, sensing Whisker's melancholy, nudged him gently with his nose. He chittered softly, a sound that Whiskers now understood to be an invitation to look forward, not back. The weasel understood that the past could hold a creature captive if it wasn't careful. He knew that the forest demanded presence, full and unwavering. Whiskers looked at Pip, his companion through so many trials, and felt a surge of gratitude. Pip had not just taught him to survive. He had taught him to belong, in a way, to this wild, magnificent world. As they descended the ridge, Pip led Whiskers to a hidden waterfall, its waters cascading into a crystal-clear pool. The air was cool and mist-laden, the sound of rushing water a soothing counterpoint to the usual forest symphony. Whiskers watched, mesmerized, as Pip, with effortless agility, caught a small fish from the churning water. It was a display of raw, natural skill, a testament to the weasel's mastery of his environment. Whiskers, despite his growing competence, knew he still had much to learn. He spent a long time by the pool, watching his reflection. His ginger fur, once meticulously groomed, was now slightly matted in places, dusted with burrs and leaves. His eyes, though still green, held a new depth, a knowing glint that spoke of challenges faced and overcome. He saw not just a house cat, but a creature touched by the wild, a survivor. The reflection was different, yes, but not worse. Perhaps, he mused, it was even better. That night, sleeping under the vast, star-studded canopy, Whiskers felt a peace he had rarely experienced in the cottage. The forest sounds, once terrifying, now formed a comforting lullaby. The cold air, once a source of discomfort, now invigorated him. He was tired, yes, and sometimes hungry, but he was also alive in a way he had never been before. He was part of something ancient and grand, a tiny thread in the vast tapestry of nature. The echoes of his old life still resonated, soft and distant, but the whispers of the wild were stronger now, calling him deeper, urging him to embrace the journey he had unwittingly begun. He closed his eyes, his fur ruffled by the gentle night breeze, and dreamed not of salmon pate, but of the hunt, of the open sky, and of the endless, exhilarating path that lay ahead. The following days brought a new intensity to Whisker's journey. Pip seemed to sense a change in the air, a subtle shift in the forest's rhythm. His usually playful chitters became more subdued, his movements more cautious. Whiskers, too, felt an underlying tension, a prickling sensation on his fur that signaled an unseen presence. They were traversing a denser part of the forest, where ancient trees formed a shadowy canopy, and the ground was a tangle of roots and thorny bushes. One evening, as twilight painted the forest in hues of deep purple and gray, a new scent drifted on the air, sharp, musky, and undeniably predatory. It was the scent of a fox, a seasoned hunter, and it was close. Whisker's heart pounded against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear. He had heard tales of foxes from Pip, of their cunning and their relentless pursuit. This was a challenge unlike any he had faced. Pip, ever alert, immediately went silent, pressing himself low to the ground. He signaled Whiskers to do the same. They hid behind a thick bush, barely breathing, their eyes scanning the deepening shadows. The air grew heavy with suspense. A twig snapped nearby, unnervingly close. Then, a pair of intelligent, amber eyes materialized from the gloom, followed by a sleek, rust-colored form. The fox was magnificent, a creature of raw power and predatory grace. It moved with a silent, gliding motion, its nose twitching, clearly on their trail. Whiskers felt a cold dread seep into his bones. His instincts screamed at him to flee, to find the nearest tree and climb, but Pip remained still, his small body tense but unmoving. The weasel was assessing, calculating. As the fox drew nearer, its gaze sweeping over their hiding spot, Pip let out a series of sharp, high-pitched chitters, a diversionary tactic. The fox's head snapped towards the sound, its attention momentarily diverted. "Run," Pip hissed, a rare, urgent command. Whiskers didn't hesitate. He burst from cover, a ginger streak against the darkening undergrowth, Pip right behind him. The fox, startled but quick, let out a snarl and gave chase. Whiskers, fueled by terror, pushed his legs harder than ever before. He weaved through trees, scrambled over fallen logs, and plunged through dense thickets, the sound of the fox's heavy breathing, a terrifying drumbeat behind him. He remembered Pip's lessons. Use the terrain, be unpredictable. He darted left, then right, squeezing through gaps too small for the larger fox. He scrambled up a low, leaning tree, then leaped to a nearby branch, an agile maneuver he would never have attempted just weeks ago. The fox, frustrated, barked furiously below, but could not follow. Whiskers, panting, clung to the branch, watching as the fox circled the base of the tree, its amber eyes burning with cunning. Pip, meanwhile, had used the diversion to lead the fox away, darting and leaving through the densest part of the undergrowth, creating a confusing trail. Whiskers watched as the fox, after a few more frustrated barks, turned and stalked off in the direction Pip had taken, still hoping to corner its prey. Alone on the branch, Whiskers trembled, partly from exertion, partly from the lingering fear. But as his breathing slowly returned to normal, a different sensation began to emerge, a thrill, a surge of triumph. He had faced a predator, a true threat of the wild, and he had survived. He had used his wits, his agility, and the lessons Pip had imparted. He wasn't just a survivor. He was a contender. He waited for what felt like an eternity, listening intently to the sounds of the forest, until he was sure the danger had passed. Then, slowly, cautiously, he descended from the tree, his heart still thrumming, but now with a new, fierce pride. He had stared death in the face and emerged victorious. The pampered house cat was truly gone, replaced by a creature forged in the crucible of the wild. After the harrowing encounter with the fox, Whiskers found Pip waiting for him in a prearranged rendezvous spot, a small, hidden alcove beneath a cascading pile of mossy boulders. Pip, looking surprisingly unfazed, chittered a greeting, a silent acknowledgement of Whiskers' bravery. The bond between them, forged in shared danger and mutual respect, had deepened irrevocably. They spent the night huddled together, the forest sounds no longer a source of fear, but a comforting blanket of life. The next morning, as the sun painted the eastern sky with soft pastels, Whiskers felt a profound shift within him. He had proven himself. He had faced the wild at its most unforgiving and found the strength to overcome. The yearning for the miller's cottage, which had occasionally surfaced as a dull ache, now felt different. It wasn't a desperate longing for escape, but a conscious choice. He had learned what he needed to learn. He had experienced the untamed freedom, the raw beauty, and the stark challenges of the wilderness. Now he felt a pull towards his original home, not out of fear, but out of a desire to integrate his newfound self with his old life. Pip seemed to understand. He led Whiskers not deeper into the forest, but along a path that subtly angled back towards the familiar, if still distant, scent of human habitation. Their journey back was different from their journey out. Whiskers moved with a quiet confidence, his steps sure, his senses attuned. He spotted game Pip might have missed, navigated tricky terrain with ease, and even led them to a hidden spring he had discovered weeks ago. He was no longer a student. He was a companion, an equal. They arrived at the edge of the miller's property late one afternoon, just as the sun began its descent. The familiar garden gate, still slightly ajar from that fateful windy day, seemed to glow in the golden light. The scent of lavender, of freshly cut grass, of the miller's pipe tobacco, wafted gently towards him, a poignant reminder of the life he had left behind. Whiskers looked at Pip, his small, wild friend. There was a silent understanding between them. Their paths diverged here. Pip nudged Whiskers one last time, a soft, affectionate gesture, then turned and melted back into the shadows of the woods, a creature of the wild, forever free. Whiskers watched him go, a lump forming in his throat, a mix of sadness and profound gratitude. He was alone again, but not truly. Pip's lessons, his companionship, would always be a part of him. Taking a deep breath, Whiskers pushed through the garden gate. The familiar sights and sounds of the miller's garden enveloped him. The well-worn path, the blooming roses, the bird bath, everything was exactly as he had left it. He padded silently to the back door, which, as always, was left slightly ajar for his convenience. Inside, the cottage was warm, quiet, and filled with the comforting scent of his home. The miller, dozing in his favorite armchair, stirred as Whiskers quietly hopped onto his lap. The miller's eyes opened, blinked, then widened in disbelief and overwhelming joy. "Whiskers, you're back." "My brave boy, where have you been?" he murmured, stroking the slightly matted, wilder fur. Whiskers purred, a deep, rumbling sound that resonated with a newfound contentment. He was home, yes, but he was not the same cat. He still enjoyed his salmon pate, his sunbeams, and his laser pointer. But now, when he gazed out the bay window at the whispering woods, his green eyes held a deeper understanding, a quiet wisdom. He knew the wild. He carried its spirit within him. He was a house cat, yes, but one with fur in the wind, a cat who had ventured beyond the known, and returned, forever changed, forever free. His adventure had ended, but a new, richer life had just begun. He was Whiskers, the pampered and the wild, a testament to the untamed spirit that lay hidden within even the most domesticated heart.